I knew I wouldn't be chosen the moment I saw Simon's smile. That half smile again, the kind that says I'm about to lie, but politely. His eyes flicked away as he handed me the white envelope, and the fluorescent lights in the conference room felt as cold as the air between us. I had lived through this scene 11 times before, but the 12th felt different. Something in me had stopped waiting, stopped swallowing it down. I opened the envelope and read the first line. Arcturus would like to thank you for your valuable contributions. I didn't need to read the rest. I already knew the script. Thank you. We appreciate your effort. But you weren't chosen. The 12th time. I set the paper down and looked at Simon. He started the usual speech, that warm, professional tone that always sounded just a little too rehearsed. He talked about timing, about potential, about leadership maturity. His words played like an old song I had heard too many times. Everything was the same as the 11 times before. The chosen one was Victoria Lynn, 10 months in the company, charming, quick, and more importantly, the daughter of a strategic investor. When Simon said her name, there was a polite ripple of applause around the table. I watched Victoria smile, radiant. I nodded and smiled back. In that moment, I felt no anger, no envy, only clarity. This game was never meant for me to win. Simon looked at me like he was waiting for me to say something. I asked calmly, "What's the reason this time, Simon? Do I need another certification? Or should I just smile more in meetings?" He hesitated, then gave that practiced grin. "Madison, you're incredible. I just think the timing isn't right." I laughed, not softly. It burst out of me, sharp and real, freezing the room. It wasn't bitterness, it was recognition. The sound of someone who finally understood every joke they had been part of. Simon's voice tightened. "Is something funny?" I met his eyes. "No. I just realized I'm the punchline." No one spoke. I folded the letter, stood, thanked them, and walked out. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor, echoing through the hallway between faint bursts of applause behind me. Outside, sunlight stretched across the marble tiles. Through the glass, Austin shimmered. High rises lit up, traffic flowing like circuitry. I used to believe I would build my life here, climb each rung patiently, wait for recognition. 6 years, 12 times. Each time, a little more faith eroded. Each time, I worked harder, thinking effort would make me undeniable. But now I understand. Not everyone wants to see you shine, especially when your light makes them squint. I returned to my desk. Victoria was laughing, showing congratulatory emails from the leadership team. I passed her and nodded. She smiled back, a touch awkward, probably expecting resentment. But all I felt was distance, like looking at a younger version of myself who still believed merit was enough. I opened my laptop, deleted the presentation draft I had spent weeks on, and shut it down. I didn't say a word the rest of the day. When I reached the parking lot, I sat in my car, engine running, air conditioning humming softly. But I didn't move. My hands rested on the steering wheel. A chill ran through me, not sadness, not anger, but something cleaner, awareness. I couldn't pinpoint when I crossed the line, but I knew one thing. For me, the game was over, and something new was about to begin. Rain started to fall as I pulled out of the lot. Drops streaked across the windshield, catching the amber glow of streetlights. I turned on my signal, took a different route, opposite from home. I didn't want to go back just yet. I wanted to drive until the feeling settled. People say failure tastes bitter. To me, it tasted clear, cold. At the next red light, a thought came to me, sharp and undeniable. If I'm the problem, then I'm also the solution. Everything they think only they understand passes through my hands. Everything they call irreplaceable survives because I keep it running. They'll realize that. Maybe not today, but soon. The light turned green. I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but relief. For the first time in 6 years, I felt free. Not the kind of freedom that comes from leaving, the kind that comes from knowing you'll never need permission again. I whispered, just loud enough for myself to hear, "This time, I won't wait for them to choose me. I'll make them need me." I went back to the company the next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, like every other day. No one noticed anything different about me, but I did. Everything had changed. The sixth floor of Arcturus always smelled like coffee mixed with the faint scent of plastic from new computers. The familiar smell of a place where people lived more with data than emotion. I walked through the glass hallway, morning light pouring in, washing over the posters that lined the walls. Innovation never sleeps. We are the future of healthcare. Those words used to make me proud. Now they just made me tired. Arcturus was a medical technology firm preparing for its IPO, well known among Austin startups. On the surface, it looked like a paradise for young innovators, but inside, it was more like a vast laboratory where everyone fought to prove they were smarter than the person next to them. Simon Hale, the director of strategy, ran most of the major projects. He knew how to talk to investors, how to make people believe he was the brain behind it all. In truth, most of what he presented on stage came from me and my team working quietly behind the scenes. I sat down at my desk and opened my email. More than 30 unread messages, most of them urgent technical issues. The patient data tracking system for a major client had crashed, potentially threatening $1 million contract. I didn't sigh anymore. After 6 years, nothing about this surprised me. I got to work, rewrote a few lines of code, and reran the data chain. 2 hours later, I restored the system, sent the report, and received a reply from Simon with just 2 words: good save. No thanks. No acknowledgement. I stared at those words, and my sister Olivia's voice echoed in my head. Don't wait for them to praise you, Maddie. People only praise what they think they might lose, and you, they never thought they could. I smiled faintly. She was right. Here, I was like a hidden server. Everyone relied on me, but no one really saw me. By noon, I headed to the cafeteria. Across the room, Victoria sat with the senior management team, laughing over glasses of orange juice. She wore a deep blue dress, her face glowing. Looking at her, I didn't feel jealousy, only a strange kind of pity. I used to be like that, believing their recognition was the ultimate goal. I carried my tray outside and sat near the window where I could see the whole city. Jenna arrived a few minutes later. She was one of the few people in this company I actually trusted. You okay? She asked, setting down her coffee. I'm fine, I said. Fine in what way? She pressed, studying me. I shrugged. Fine in the way you feel when you realize you've spent 6 years waiting for something that was never coming. Jenna stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, maybe they don't see you, Maddie, because you make everything run too smoothly. No one realizes how complex the system is when it never breaks. I looked at her and let out a small laugh. Is that supposed to be a compliment or a critique? She smiled. Just the truth. Simple words, but they stayed with me all afternoon. Later, I met with the technical team. Simon showed up late, walking in with his usual confidence, commanding, assured, as if the whole room belonged to him. He made a few polite remarks, then projected the quarterly customer data growth plan onto the screen. I read through the slides, line by line, chart by chart. It was my analysis, the exact report I had spent 2 weeks preparing. Not a single mention of my name. I didn't react. I didn't even take notes. When the meeting ended, Simon patted my shoulder. Great presentation, Maddie. You really know how to make the data speak. I replied quietly, yeah, it just happens to speak with my voice. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I laughed too, but inside I recorded it. One more instance of how my work disappeared under someone else's name. When everyone left, I stayed in the office, looking out the window as the city lights came on. I thought back to my first days at Arcturus, when just hearing my name, mentioned in a meeting, was enough to keep me happy for a week. I used to think hard work and honesty were the keys to being recognized. But here, the only key was finesse. I could learn that. Around 8 in the evening, I shut down my computer and grabbed my coat. Jenna texted, "Don't stay up too late." I replied, "Don't worry, I have a plan." As I stepped out of the building, the night wind felt stronger than usual. Maybe it was about to rain. I passed the large sign by the door, Arcturus, leading the future of medical innovation. I stopped for a moment, staring at the words. If they were truly leading, they wouldn't need me to keep everything running. And if they thought I'd remain the quiet fixer forever, they were about to discover their biggest mistake. I walked on, feeling strangely calm. Some things only become clear once you stop looking up and start looking around. The day ended like any other, but I knew it was the beginning of something entirely new. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. My small apartment was lit only by the faint glow of the laptop screen reflecting on the ceiling. I sat there, staring at the blank display, hands resting on the keyboard, but not typing a single word. 6 years, 12 rejections. I could remember each one, every reason, every vague promise they gave me to keep me trying. Maybe what hurt the most wasn't being overlooked, but that I believed, foolishly, that if I just worked harder, they would change. The phone rang. It was Olivia, my sister. I saw her name on the screen and hesitated before answering. "You called at the right time," I said, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Work again?" she asked gently, her tone calm but edged with worry. I let out a short laugh. I just got my 12th rejection letter. Feels exactly like the last 11, except this time it doesn't hurt anymore. Olivia was quiet for a few seconds. "Are you thinking of quitting?" I sighed. "I don't know. I've been there 6 years, poured everything into it. If I walk away now, it'll feel like admitting defeat." She chuckled softly on the other end. "You haven't failed, Maddie. You're just stuck in a system that was never designed to see you." I sat still, listening to her voice, low, steady, and certain. "Listen to me," she said. "You don't have to quit. You just need to stop giving them the best of you. Stop trying to prove your worth to people who never intended to recognize it. They don't deserve to see everything you're capable of." I leaned on the table, looking out the window. The city was still glowing, traffic still moving as if nothing mattered more than keeping the motion going. "But that's how I was raised," I said quietly. "You work hard. You prove yourself. You earn respect." Olivia's reply came fast. "No, Maddie. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just prove to yourself that you can live without them." After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. Her words replayed in my head. "Stop giving them the best of you." That sentence echoed all night. I realized I had given Arcturus everything: my time, my skills, my health, and my faith that fairness existed. But I had never asked the question that mattered most: did they deserve it? The next morning, I got to the office earlier than usual. The sun had just risen, casting pale gold light across the glass walls. I opened my laptop and scrolled through reports. A new message from Simon appeared in the shared inbox. "Congratulations to Victoria on her official promotion to head of strategic planning. Let's all support her fully." I read it without emotion. Maybe once I would have felt bitter, but now there was only clarity. Everything I'd built here no longer meant anything. I began to observe more. Everyone was busy chasing directives, preparing slides, and sending updates. Simon walked past with his coffee cup, greeting people with that practiced smile. When he reached my desk, he said, "Can you resend the client analysis report? I'd like to review it before the meeting." I asked. "The version I wrote, or the one you presented?" He paused, then grinned. "Same report, Maddie." I smiled back. "Right, just a different person standing on stage." He didn't answer, just patted my shoulder and walked away. I opened my old inbox and started digging through years of emails. Every project told the same story. Simon got the credit, I fixed the problems, and someone else got the praise. Each message was a small cut, sharp but sobering. I created a new folder, named it Truth, and began saving every email, every file, every note. I didn't plan to use them yet, but I knew I would need them someday. At noon, I met Jenna at the cafe downstairs. She noticed something in my expression. "What are you thinking, Maddie?" I stirred my coffee, watching the foam swirl and fade. "I think I've spent 6 years climbing the wrong ladder. Now I'm going to build my own." Jenna frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled, calm and steady. "I'm not planning to quit. I'm just done trying to earn their approval. From now on, I'll make it impossible for them to ignore me." That afternoon, Simon held a short meeting to prepare for the investor presentation. He went over next quarter's growth plan, built entirely on my analysis, of course. I sat through it without reacting, without taking notes. When everyone left, he turned to me. "You should be proud, Maddie. Most of these ideas are yours." I answered softly, "You're right, most of them." Then I stood up and walked out. That night, back home, I opened my laptop and stared at the new truth folder. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I knew I was crossing into a new phase, one where I no longer sought acceptance, but prepared for precision. I wrote a single line in my notebook. To beat them, you have to understand them. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay down. Outside, rain began to fall in a quiet rhythm, like steady breathing. I knew that starting tomorrow, I would no longer be the woman waiting for a chance. I would be the one creating it. I began the next chapter of my life with an Excel file. It sounded dull, but in my world, power lived in numbers. The file wasn't a regular report. It was something I called the dependency map, a document no one knew existed except me. That morning, I arrived at the office early, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and sat down. The screen reflected my face, calm, cold, no trace of the exhaustion I used to carry. I opened a new file and named it Dependency Map, Madison C. I started listing every project I had ever worked on, every process I had built, every system I had fixed. The first column was for major clients: Helix Care, Biomedica, Redwood Health, and Shiz Clinics. Beside each name, I noted who managed it, who executed it, and who actually solved the problems when they appeared. On almost every line, the name in the Handled By column was mine. I added more notes: Patient Data Management System, designed by me; Client Financial Reporting System, built by me and my team; Internal Security Architecture, mine again. Each entry appeared like a thread binding Arcturus to me. I wasn't just their employee. I was the code they couldn't uninstall. Every morning, I spent an hour updating that map. I detailed every workflow, added links, and measured how dependent each department was. Not to destroy anything, but to understand the real weight of my work. For 6 years, I had been made to believe I was just a piece of the system. Now I saw it clearly. The system existed because of me. At lunch, Jenna caught me working and raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing? It looks like you're planning to take over the world." I smiled without looking up. Not taking over, just preparing for freedom. She studied me, her tone shifting. "You're not planning to quit, are you?" I paused for a moment. "No, I'm just rewriting the record, the right way." That afternoon, I joined a client call with Helix Care. They were having trouble with data synchronization. While the tech team scrambled, I fixed it in 10 minutes. When the client thanked us, Simon jumped in. "That's thanks to our new system." I smiled. "That system was my idea, Simon. But you're right, it works beautifully." He froze for a second, then forced a laugh. The irritation in his eyes told me I was moving in the right direction. Later that evening, when the office was nearly empty, I stayed behind. The whole floor hummed quietly under the vents. I reopened the dependency map. Beyond the project data, I added a new section: Personal Connections. I listed the people who tended to support me, those loyal to Simon, and most importantly, the clients who worked directly with me. One of them was Ethan Reyes, CEO of Biomedica. He was quiet but fair. Many times, during Arcturus's internal chaos, Ethan reached out to me directly, never through Simon. I remembered him saying once, "Madison, if you ever leave that company, I'm not sure we'll continue working with them." Back then, I had brushed it off with a polite laugh. Now, I understand its weight. I wrote Ethan's name, circled it in red, and added a note beside it: Personal trust, not owned by Arcturus. Day by day, my map grew thicker. I saved it on a private drive, protected by a password only I knew. At the same time, I began building a personal dossier: projects I led, outcomes I delivered. Not a resume, but a capability record. I wasn't making it to apply anywhere. I was making it to see myself clearly, the full worth that Arcturus had never acknowledged. One afternoon, Simon called me into his office. "Madison, you've seemed busy lately with personal work. Is something going on?" I replied evenly, "Nothing much. I'm just organizing my responsibilities, so if anyone ever needs to replace me, they won't be lost." He smiled, but it looked forced. "Replace you? Who said anything about that?" I met his eyes. "No one. But you know as well as I do, no one is truly irreplaceable, right?" I stood up before he could answer. On my way out, I caught Victoria watching me. She didn't say a word, but her curious look said enough. Maybe she sensed something was coming, something she couldn't yet name. That night, I got home late. I opened the dependency map again, staring at the tangled lines on the screen. I added one final note. When they realize I'm the one holding every circuit together, it'll already be too late. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I was moving, quietly, deliberately. And I knew that soon they would teach me the most important lesson of all, that sometimes true power comes from knowing exactly when to stay silent. A month after I started the dependency map, Arcturus entered the final sprint toward its IPO. The office buzzed like a hive, people rushing in and out, meetings stacking one after another. The air was tense, but to me, it was the perfect moment. When everyone's chasing the light of success, no one notices the shadows behind it, and I was that shadow. Simon barely left the 10th floor anymore, where the executive team worked. He was basking in the glory of his new title, Strategic Architect, the phrase the local press had just used in a glowing profile. I read that article one Monday morning over coffee in the break room. In it, Simon was quoted as saying, "I believe transparency and accurate data are the foundation of success." I almost laughed out loud. Accurate data. He had no idea how right and how wrong he was. During a system audit, I found irregularities in the revenue report Simon had sent to the investors. Some figures were rounded up, and a few data entries were edited manually. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I opened the original file I had created. They didn't match. It wasn't a technical error, it was deliberate. I sat there staring at the two spreadsheets side by side, my heart pounding. If those edits were ever discovered, the fallout would be massive. But to Simon, this wasn't about ethics, it was about strategy. I didn't tell anyone, I didn't report it. I simply opened a new folder and named it Truth Arcturus Zip. Inside, I saved everything: the original file, the altered version, the timestamps, and the access logs. I didn't send it anywhere, I just kept it, a weapon, stored carefully until the right time. I wanted to confirm whether this was a pattern. A few days later, I created a bait report. Dummy data, harmless, nothing real. I sent it to Simon with a short note. Take a look at these numbers. I think they may need adjusting before the board meeting. Less than an hour later, the file came back, polished, revenues up, inconsistencies gone. His own hands had confirmed what I needed to know. That night, I printed the report, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope in my desk drawer at home. I knew I was holding something that could decide Simon's fate, and maybe Arcturus's too. But I didn't plan to use it to destroy. Not yet. I just needed a way out. I called a labor lawyer, a friend of Olivia's from Seattle. I gave him a general outline, no company names. He said clearly, if you haven't signed a non-compete, you can leave and start your own business. Just make sure you don't take proprietary IP. As for evidence of fraud, you're legally allowed to keep it as protection. His words felt like air filling my lungs again. A few days later, I met Ethan Reyes, the CEO of Biomedica, during a client meeting. He looked at me, direct as always. Madison, something's off in Arcturus's reports. Our numbers don't match theirs. I couldn't say much, so I simply told him, sometimes numbers don't tell the truth, but I'd suggest you keep copies of your original data. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. In his eyes, I saw something close to trust, and maybe a silent promise. That afternoon, the company threw a celebration for the IPO milestone. Everyone gathered at a high-end bar downtown. Warm lights, red wine, laughter echoing across the room. Simon floated through the crowd, glass in hand, smiling like a man already famous. When he saw me, he approached, his voice carrying a hint of alcohol. Madison, you're the most reliable person I've ever worked with. I don't know how this company would survive without you. I raised my glass, touched it lightly to his. You're right, Simon. It wouldn't. But I don't belong to anyone. He burst out laughing, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. Driving home later, I rolled down the window, letting the night air rush in. The city glittered, cars threading through the streets like veins of light. I thought about Simon, about all the years I'd kept quiet for the sake of professionalism. Everything I'd ever done was to prove I was worthy. while they used my work to hide their cracks. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. They needed me more than I needed them, and for the first time, I held something they didn't control. When I got home, I opened my laptop and wrote in my notebook, 6 months. 6 months to prepare for the day I walk away. I poured a glass of wine, played soft music, and watched the reflections shimmer inside the glass. A new game had begun, and this time I wasn't playing to win them over, I was playing to be free. From that night on, I started counting down. 6 months. 6 months to leave Arcturus quietly, perfectly. I didn't plan to storm out or cause a scandal. I wanted them to smile as they said goodbye, right until they realized I had taken the soul of their entire system with me. Every morning, I still arrived on time. I still sent my reports, joined meetings, and laughed at the right moments. But inside, everything had shifted. I no longer worked for promotions or performance reviews. I was building something of my own. The first phase, I called it reclaiming value. I began refining every process I owned, optimizing them, documenting each step, not for handover, but for preservation. I created personal versions of every file, stripped of company secrets, keeping only what I had built myself, my intellect, my effort, and now my foundation for what came next. Then I started building my network. Almost every week, I met someone for coffee, a former colleague, a client, a partner. The conversations were light, never about leaving. I simply asked about their work, their challenges, and what they wished a tech consultancy would do better. I listened, remembered every detail. Ethan Reyes was one of them. During our last meeting, he said, "Madison, if you ever think about leaving Arcturus, I want to be the first to know." I smiled. "I'm still here, but who knows what the future holds?" He nodded. "I'm serious," he said. At home, I wrote in my notebook, "Clients don't belong to companies. They belong to the people they trust." In the second month, I opened a new bank account and registered a business name, Aurora Metrics, LLC. The name came to me while watching a documentary about the northern lights. Aurora, that rare glow that only appears when the sky is darkest. It felt like my story. I hired a lawyer to review my employment contract. As he confirmed, I had never signed a non-compete. Arcturus had been too confident to imagine I could ever be a threat. They were wrong. The next phase I called breaking illusions. I stopped taking the blame for others. I stopped replying to late-night emails. I stopped letting Simon stand before the board with the presentations I had written. He noticed faster than I expected. One morning, he called me into his office and shut the door. "You've been distant lately, Maddie. Is something wrong?" "Nothing at all. I'm just focusing on my own responsibilities." "Your responsibilities? I thought everything here was about the team." I smiled. "Then maybe you should ask the team how much they can handle without me." He stared at me, thrown off. He wasn't used to me pushing back. He started to say something, then stopped. "You should take a few days off. You seem stressed." I walked out knowing he had begun to suspect. The following week, something strange appeared in my inbox. Some emails were marked read, even though I hadn't opened them. I sent a test message to myself and traced the access log. An unfamiliar IP, Simon's, office. He was monitoring me. I smiled. Fine. If he wanted to see, I'd show him exactly what I wanted him to see. I created a fake report, a draft filled with subtle errors, and left it in an easy-to-find folder as if I'd carelessly forgotten to delete it. 2 days later, Simon was presenting it in an internal meeting. Confident. Until Ethan, attending remotely, interrupted. "Simon, these figures are wrong. I updated them last week." The room went silent. Simon's face flushed as he stumbled, blaming it on a data sync issue. I stayed still, watching, saying nothing. After that, he kept his distance. But suspicion lingered. I could feel Victoria's eyes on me more often, too. The woman who had once been promoted over me now watched closely, maybe noticing that Simon was losing control, or realizing that I wasn't the same person she thought I was. One late afternoon, Victoria approached my desk. "Madison, Simon asked me to get the old process files. He said he wants to review them." "I'll send a copy tomorrow," I said. "But be careful. Those files can be misleading if you don't understand the context." She nodded, her tone hesitant. "I know." I just wanted to say, it seems like you know more than people think. I smiled. Sometimes, knowing too much is the real risk, isn't it? When she left, I leaned back. The game was shifting. By the fourth month, I had completed the framework for Aurora Metrics, a consultancy for data systems and workflow optimization in healthcare. I hadn't signed a single contract yet, but two clients had already expressed interest, Biomedica among them. I didn't pitch, I didn't sell. I simply answered the questions they came to me with. It all unfolded so naturally that it almost startled me. By the fifth month, I'd hit my financial goal, enough savings to live half a year without income. I was ready. But I didn't want to vanish suddenly. I wanted to leave at the perfect moment, when Arcturus needed me most, when they still believed I'd always be there. I chose the date, mid-deployment of their biggest project, when everything was halfway built. I'd resign on a Monday, exactly 6 months from the day I wrote my first line in that notebook. The night before, I sat by my window, watching the city lights. I felt both nervous and calm. No one knew. No one suspected. I had turned anger into a plan, disappointment into a strategy, and tomorrow I would walk out of that place as if I'd never needed it at all. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, tomorrow, they'll finally know what it feels like when a gear stops turning. Monday morning arrived, the day I had chosen. The sky over Austin was grayer than usual. I woke early, poured a cup of black coffee, and stood by the window, watching raindrops gather on the glass. Everything looked calm, but inside me, there was a strange stillness. Not fear, but the quiet certainty of someone about to do something irreversible. 6 months of preparation had led to this. Today, everything would change. I reached the office earlier than anyone else. The building was silent except for the steady hum of the air conditioner. I placed my resignation letter on my desk, sealed neatly inside a white envelope. I had written it 3 weeks ago, but every line still carried the weight of the years I'd spent here. One clear sentence: resignation effective in 2 weeks. At the bottom, my signature, steady, unshaken. When people began arriving, I went about my routine, fixed a few tech tickets, replied to client emails, and even wished a coworker happy birthday. I wanted the day to unfold like any other so that the shock afterward would hit even harder. Around 10, I took the envelope and walked straight to the 10th floor, Simon's office. He was on the phone, pacing, his voice sharp and hurried as always. When he saw me, he gestured for a moment, then hung up. Madison, what's going on? Is Helix Care stable? Stable, but that's not why I'm here. I set the envelope on his desk. He looked at it, then at me. What's this? My resignation letter. The room went still. Simon gave a short laugh, thinking I was joking. You're serious? Now? Madison, we're days away from the IPO. You can't just leave. I can. And I am, I said evenly. I've prepared a full 2-week transition. Everything's documented. He stood up, voice rising. Do you have any idea how much chaos this will cause? You're running Helix Care, Biomedica, and Meridian. If you go, not we, Simon, you. He froze, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. This is about the promotion, isn't it? If that's what this is? No, I interrupted. It's about realizing I've believed in promises that were never meant to be kept. For a long moment, he said nothing. I could see it in his face, a mix of anger and panic. He was calculating, finally grasping what my departure meant. Without me, the whole framework would buckle. I turned to the door. 2 weeks, Simon. That's all you have. As the door closed behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was like loosening a rope that had been around my neck for 6. The first 2 days passed quietly. Then midweek, things began to unravel. Minor system glitches, delays, client complaints. Normally, I would have fixed everything in hours. Now I didn't. I had documented everything, but no one understood it well enough to execute. By the 5th day, Helix Care threatened to suspend its contract over lack of technical support. Simon ran around trying to contain the damage, but the harder he tried, the worse it got. Biomedica's data report started showing discrepancies too. I sat at my desk, calm, finishing my remaining tasks and answering every request with the same line. The information is in the handover files. On the sixth day, I saw Simon in the conference room, pale, shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. As I passed, I heard him on the phone. No, we can't replace her right now. I tried assigning it, but the system won't run. I kept walking, a small smile forming. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was peace. The balance had finally shifted. On the eighth day, an internal memo went out. The board requested the tech division to urgently resolve data issues before the IPO meeting. That same hour, I received a message from Ethan Reyes. Madison, I heard you're leaving Arcturus. Is it true? Confirmed, I replied. He wrote back, then maybe it's time we talked about something new. I read the message and knew my plan was falling perfectly into place. That afternoon, Simon called me into a meeting. Vernon, the CEO, was there too. The room felt heavy. Vernon spoke first. Madison, we hear you're planning to resign. That worries us. You oversee too many critical processes. We'd like you to stay, at least until after the IPO. I looked at him, then at Simon. Thank you, but my decision's made. 2 weeks is enough. Simon jumped in. We can revisit your position, senior consultant. 15% salary increase. I met his eyes, recognizing that same practiced smile, the one I'd seen a dozen times before. No need, Simon. I've already outgrown any title you could give me. Vernon's voice softened. We'll lose a lot if you leave. Maybe. But sometimes loss is the only way to learn. I walked out, leaving them in silence. As the door shut, I heard a chair scrape and Simon's exhausted sigh. 2 weeks passed quickly. On the final day, I cleared my desk, just a few photos, my favorite pen, and a small plant Jenna had given me. When I stepped out of the elevator, Simon was waiting in the lobby. Madison, he said quietly, you're making a mistake. You won't last 6 months out there. You don't understand this industry. Without Arcturus, you're nothing. I looked at him for a moment, then replied softly, maybe. But at least I'll be myself. I turned and walked through the glass doors, feeling the first cool gust of early season wind on my face. The sky above Austin was still gray, but to me, everything glowed. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Let's talk on Monday. I've got a few ideas for collaboration. I smiled. 6 years ago, I walked into Arcturus believing hard work would be rewarded. Today, I walked out knowing something truer. Sometimes, to be seen, you have to leave. And I knew one thing for sure. For them, the real storm was just beginning. 2 weeks after leaving Arcturus, I still woke up early, opened my laptop, and checked my inbox, only to realize no one needed me to rescue a system at midnight anymore. No urgent messages, no late-night texts from Simon saying, Madison, I need you. Just morning light spilling through the apartment window, and a silence that felt almost sacred. I made coffee and opened the first file in my new folder. Aurora Metrics, Foundation Plan. Everything I had ever documented, from the dependency map to client strategy, had become the groundwork for my own company, not a massive firm, but a model for ethical data consulting, where truth was worth what it deserved. The first week, I worked alone. The second week, Ethan Reyes, CEO of Biomedica, reached out. Madison, I heard you left Arcturus. If you are building something, we would like to be your first client. I paused. You trust me that much? He smiled over the call. Not you. The results you deliver. 3 days later, we signed. The first contract for Aurora Metrics, and one that used to belong to Arcturus. The news spread faster than I expected. When Helix Care and Redwood Health heard I had left, they each reached out with proposals. I did not go after them. They came to me. It was as if everything I had done quietly for 6 years had finally become visible. By the end of the first month, Aurora Metrics had 3 clients. By the second, we had rented a small office downtown. By the third, I hired my first data engineer, Jenna, my old coworker, the one who once told me, do not burn yourself out for people who do not see you. Everything was unfolding according to plan. But the real reckoning had not even begun. About a month later, I received an email from an old internal address, ren.b@arcturus.tech. Ren, Vernon's former assistant and someone who had quietly helped me more than once. The message contained only one line: "You should see this." Attached was a zip file. Inside it, meeting notes from an internal audit. Discrepancy in IPO financial report. Suspected manual edits, traced to account. Simon Hale. I read it slowly. Every detail matched what I had archived in Truth Arcturus. Zip. The evidence I had safeguarded for months. Simon had taken my reports and inflated the revenue figures to impress investors. And now, without me there to clean it up, it was all collapsing. A few days later, the headlines hit. Arcturus Technologies is under SEC investigation for potential data fraud in IPO filings. I looked at the alert on my phone and smiled faintly. I had not sent anything. It had to be Wren, or someone else inside. But I knew this much. Without the original logs I had kept, they would have had nothing to prove it. I had not sought revenge. I had simply let the truth do its work. A week later, Vernon called. His voice was rough, tired. "Madison, things are worse than we thought. Investors are pulling out. Simon's been suspended. I need to ask, did you have anything to do with the leak?" "No, Vernon," I said calmly. "I did not leak anything. But maybe when he edited the data, he left his own fingerprints behind. Karma's just code running its course." He fell silent. I could hear his breath, heavy, resigned. "Can you come back, Madison?" he asked finally. "We need your help to stabilize things. We can negotiate. Anything you want." I smiled. "I am stabilizing things already, Vernon. Just somewhere that values honesty more than promises." When the call ended, I sat quietly for a while. What I felt was not triumph, it was closure. A chapter closing cleanly, without noise. Days later, the press confirmed it. Simon Hale was terminated after an internal audit confirmed falsified IPO data. Arcturus lost 3 major clients: Biomedica, Helix Care, and Meridian Health. All 3 had already signed with Aurora Metrics. The media began circling. An industry journal ran a headline: "Aurora Metrics, founded by a former Arcturus data lead, emerges as a symbol of integrity in medical analytics." I read it in my new office. Jenna walked in, grinning. "The press is calling you the woman who brought down Arcturus with the truth." I laughed. "I did not bring them down, Jenna. They did that themselves. I just stopped holding them up." One morning, while reviewing a new contract from Helix Care, a LinkedIn message popped up. From Victoria Lynn. "Do you have time for coffee? I need to talk. Arcturus is falling apart. I want out." I stared at it for a long moment, then replied, "Tomorrow, same place, 10 in the morning." The next day she arrived, thinner, tired, stripped of the bright arrogance she once wore like armor. "They are blaming each other," she said. "Projects failing, clients leaving, Simon's gone. I do not want to stay there anymore. I want to do this right. If possible, I want to work with you." I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Send me your resume, Victoria. Aurora always has room for people who want to do what is right." After she left, I stayed by the window, watching the street below, and felt a calm I had not known in years. I did not need to shout that I had been right. The world had proven it for me. 3 months later, Victoria became Aurora's client director. The company doubled in size, signing 2 major contracts once exclusive to Arcturus. The financial news headline read, "Aurora Metrics secures $1 million, 5-year national healthcare data contract, replacing Arcturus Technologies." I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair. If this was not revenge, I did not know what was. A kind of revenge that required no sabotage, no weapon, just truth and time. That night, I sat in my office, watching the city lights outside. Jenna messaged me. "We bought a cake to celebrate the quarterly revenue. You coming?" I smiled and typed back, "On my way." Before leaving, I looked at the old whiteboard on the wall, the one where I had once written the first 3 words of Aurora Metrics. I added a final line beneath them. "No need for revenge, just freedom and truth." Then I turned off the lights and walked out, leaving behind the soft glow of the company I had built. and of a woman the world had finally learned to listen to. 1 year after the fall of Arcturus, Aurora Metrics had become one of the fastest growing data consulting firms in Austin. We had 17 employees, clients stretching from Texas to California, and first year revenue exceeding $12 million. The press called me the woman who brought Arcturus to its knees with the truth. But I didn't care about titles. I only cared that, for the first time in my life, I was working in a place where everyone was treated with respect. Aurora was no longer just a company. It was living proof that fairness existed, even if it sometimes arrived late. One Monday morning, I was reviewing our West Coast expansion plan when the office phone rang. Jenna answered, spoke briefly, then turned to me with an uneasy look. Maddie, Vernon wants to talk, the former CEO of Arcturus. I looked up. Tell him I'm busy. He said it's important. He's in Austin and wants to meet in person. I paused, then nodded. Fine, schedule it. But at a cafe, not the office. That afternoon, I arrived at the same cafe where I'd once met Victoria the day she decided to leave Arcturus. Vernon was already there. He looked older, his hair grayer, his posture smaller. When he saw me, he stood, extended a hand. I shook it, cool and brief. Madison, he began, voice rough. Thank you for coming. I don't even know where to start. You should start with why you called me. He nodded, sighing. Arcturus is collapsing. We've lost nearly all major clients. Investors have pulled out. I won't lie, if nothing changes, the company will be bankrupt within months. But there's still a chance. If you agree to collaborate, we might secure a recovery deal, rebuild investor trust. I looked at him. What do you mean by collaborate? We want to acquire Aurora Metrics, or at least merge. You would become chief executive of global data operations. We're prepared to pay 3 times your company's current valuation. I laughed, not because it was absurd, but because it was far too late. You're asking me to sell my soul to the same people who once told me I had no value? Vernon lowered his head. I know. I was wrong. Simon was wrong. But I'm trying to save the hundreds of people still working there. You could help them. I met his eyes. Vernon, do you remember what you told me on my last day at Arcturus? You said I wouldn't survive 6 months out there, and now you're sitting here asking me to save your company. Do you see the irony? He didn't answer. His face looked drained. I'm not here to beg, Madison. I'm here because I believe only you can fix what I broke. I was silent for a moment. Then I spoke slowly, each word steady. I don't fix what's meant to fall. I build what comes next. Because I learned something. Sometimes, to move forward, you have to leave the ruins behind. He looked at me with a mix of disappointment and understanding. I stood, placed Aurora Metrics' business card on the table. You can still contact me, but as a client, not a savior. Then I walked away. A few weeks later, the headlines broke. Arcturus Technologies officially files for bankruptcy, assets transferred to third-party partners. Beneath the article, in smaller text, Aurora Metrics, founded by a former Arcturus employee, has signed a new contract with the U.S. Department of Health to modernize the National Hospital data system. I read it from my new office on the 14th floor of the Austin Tech Tower. Jenna walked in and set a cup of coffee on my desk. They just published another piece about you. I smiled. What did they say? That you replaced Arcturus. That justice has finally been served. I turned toward the window, sunlight reflecting off the river below. Justice doesn't come from anger, Jenna. It comes when you're strong enough not to need revenge. She smiled softly. So you've forgiven them? I thought for a moment, then said, No, I just don't care anymore. That evening, I stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. I opened an old file on my computer, trutharcturus.zip, the one I'd kept for years. I looked at it one last time, then dragged it to the trash. The screen asked for confirmation. I clicked yes. The file disappeared. No more past, no more evidence, no more wait. I stepped out onto the balcony, watching the city shimmer beneath the lights. And in that moment, I realized something. They once made me doubt my worth. But by treating me unfairly, they'd forced me to find who I truly was. Arcturus may have fallen, but I hadn't. I had been reborn. The next morning, Victoria came in carrying a proposal for international expansion. We've been invited to speak at the National Health Tech Conference, she said. What's the topic? I asked. Turning rejection into reinvention. I laughed. Sounds like us. When she left the room, I opened my laptop and began writing the first line of my keynote speech. I was rejected 12 times. They told me I wasn't ready, not good enough. But the truth is, they weren't ready for someone like me. And the moment I stopped asking for permission to rise, I built my own way up. I saved the document, stood, and looked out the window. The Austin sky was clear and blue, sunlight gleaming on the glass of the building across the street. On its surface, I could faintly see the reflection of the words, Aurora Metrics, a quiet reminder that the sweetest revenge is never revenge at all. It's living so well that they regret losing you.